The versatility of digital SLR cameras is extended through a range of accessories and peripherals. We are going to cover two basic ones here, the tripod and the interval timer. These have particular application in architectural photography. Most tripods attach to the camera via standard tripod screw mount on the underside of the camera. Tripods now are typically supplied with a quick release shoe that screws into the base in lieu of a direct tripod attachment to the camera. Most tripods work more or less the same. The wide variability in cost comes down to the quality of construction, weight, and smoothness of operation of moving parts. In this medium cost tripod, we have all of the useful features. The legs have 3 extendable segments and an extendable center pole. It is ideal that the tripod can extend high enough to give a comfortable standing shooting position. The benefit of the model shown here is that the center shaft has a hook on the end, which is ideal for adding a weighted bag. This is useful when taking photos outdoors when there is a bit of wind, as an unweighted tripod can be subject to camera shake, particularly if you are using it to do time-lapse photography. Ideally, the tripod should provide 3 main directions of movement: a tilt arm to move the camera up and down, which is also used to pan the camera side to side. There is a plate that the camera mounts to that also pivots 90 degrees, so you can shoot in landscape or portrait mode. A leveling bubble is handy, particularly when taking images of models and buildings, as with a slightly wide-angle lens, if you don't get your camera horizontal, you can get quite distorted perspectives. The last trick that some tripods can do, which is particularly useful when taking images of your models, is the ability to remove the central shaft and reverse it so you can hang the camera under the tripod and shoot looking straight down. Another reasonably specialist accessory that is very useful for architectural photography is the interval timer. Most higher cost and higher specified digital SLR cameras will have an onboard interval timer, but most sub $1,000 cameras probably would not. It is possible to get an interval timer for around $50, and they plug into the accessory port, which is hidden under a rubber cover on the side of the camera. The functionality of interval timers varies between brands, but essentially they do the same thing in that they will fire the shutter at set intervals, say once every second, for a set duration, say for an hour, or for a set number of images. One of the tricky things in setting up a time-lapse is setting the correct interval or duration in relation to your desired aims. A bit of maths and logic is needed at this point, so stick with us. When the images are stitched together in the final video, the default frame rate for smooth flowing video is about 30 frames per second. Therefore, in the first scenario shown on the slide, if we simply set the interval at 1 second and capture 500 shots, then we would end up with 16 seconds of video at the end. In the second scenario, if we wanted to aim to 30 seconds of video at 30 frames per second, then we would need to shoot off 900 images. The interval could vary because it does not matter what the interval is, as the video length is determined solely by the number of shots taken and the frame rate. In the third scenario, where we want 30 seconds of video to capture over 6 hours of real time at 30 frames a second, then we simply figure out the total time of the capture, which is 6 hours in this instance, or 21,600 seconds, and then divide it by the number of shots needed to get 30 seconds of video at 30 frames a second, which is 900 shots. So therefore, this gives us an interval of 1 shot every 24 seconds. The smoothness of the final video is determined by the length of the interval. If the interval is too long, then the animation will end up being quite jumpy. If we were to aim for a smoother video over 6 hours, we could take 1 shot every 5 seconds, which would give us 4,320 shots, which, when translated into 30 seconds, would give us a frame rate of about 144 frames per second, which is quite high. Post-production of time-lapse sequences are completed in special production software such as Adobe Premiere or specialist stitching programs available on the web. It is worth noting that when taking images for a time-lapse sequence, it is better to get the exposure and focus setting right on the first shot using the manual mode and then switching off the autofocus so that the camera does not always hunt and readjust the settings throughout the sequence, as this can affect the smoothness of the transitions. Also check your memory card capacity before your sequence to make sure you have adequate space on the card. Though it is possible to shoot a time-lapse sequence in RAW format and do bulk adjustments post-production, it will significantly increase your memory needs, so you will need an especially large memory card on board.